There is a moment that almost nobody talks about. It is not the breakup. It is not the argument. It is not the day someone walks away convinced they were the most important person in your life. The real moment comes much later. It arrives quietly. No dramatic confrontation. No revenge. No emotional speech. Just a simple realization. You are doing fine. And for some people, that realization is more threatening than any fight could ever be. Because there are individuals who build their sense of importance on a hidden assumption that your emotional world will always orbit around them. The moment that assumption dies, something remarkable happens. The illusion of their superiority begins to crack. Psychologists often refer to this dynamic through concepts like narcissistic supply, emotional dependency, external validation, and projection. But behind all the terminology lies one simple truth. The person who no longer controls your emotions no longer controls your reality. And few stories reveal this more clearly than what happened to Princess Diana. For years, Diana lived inside one of the most scrutinized relationships in modern history. The world saw the glamour, the titles, the public appearances. But beneath the surface was a woman increasingly portrayed as someone whose value depended on her position within a particular relationship. Much of the media narrative revolved around comparisons. Comparisons create hierarchy. Hierarchy creates dependency. Dependency creates psychological vulnerability. When people are repeatedly compared, one person is subtly cast as the center of gravity, while the other becomes the supporting character. That dynamic doesn't only exist in romantic relationships, it exists in workplaces, families, friendships, and social groups. The moment a person begins accepting that role, they start losing contact with their own identity. Psychologists call this identity diffusion, a gradual blurring of where I end and where someone else's influence begins. Then, something changed. After the separation, Diana began building a life that was increasingly independent of the narrative surrounding her marriage. Humanitarian work, global advocacy, personal growth, a new public image. Something fascinating happened. The more she focused on her own purpose, the less she appeared emotionally dependent on the old hierarchy. This illustrates an important psychological principle. True power is rarely demonstrated through opposition. It is demonstrated through self-definition. The nervous system recognizes the difference. When a person is trapped in emotional dependency, the brain remains locked in a state of hypervigilance. Every message matters. Every opinion matters. Every reaction matters. But when self-definition returns, the nervous system gradually exits survival mode. And that is where real freedom begins. The most powerful statement Diana ever made was not verbal. It was behavioral. She became increasingly visible as an individual rather than as someone's extension. And that shift reveals something uncomfortable for people who rely on controlling narratives. The moment you become your own reference point, their status automatically shrinks. Not because you attack them, but because you stopped measuring yourself against them. That brings us to another story, one that unfolded on a completely different stage. Years before becoming one of the most influential television personalities in history, Oprah Winfrey was told she wasn't suitable for television news. She was demoted, criticized, dismissed. People around her essentially communicated the same message: you are not enough. Many individuals spend years trying to prove those critics wrong. But Oprah's transformation followed a different path. Instead of obsessing over the people who underestimated her, she invested her energy into developing her own voice. This distinction is crucial. Psychologists often separate extrinsic motivation from intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is driven by proving something. Intrinsic motivation is driven by becoming something. The first keeps you emotionally connected to your critics. The second sets you free from them. When Oprah eventually became one of the most recognizable figures in media history, Her success wasn't powerful because it defeated specific people. It was powerful because those people became irrelevant to the equation. And this is where many viewers misunderstand psychological recovery. Recovery is not winning. Recovery is graduating. Winning still requires an opponent. Graduation requires only growth. People who rely on superiority narratives secretly expect resistance. They expect arguments. They expect emotional reactions. What they rarely expect is indifference. Indifference is psychologically disruptive because it removes the feedback loop. No reaction, no emotional fuel, no validation, no proof of continued importance. Researchers studying interpersonal dynamics often describe this through reinforcement theory. Behavior that no longer receives reinforcement gradually loses strength. The same principle applies to toxic emotional dynamics. When your attention disappears, the structure that depended on it weakens. And then comes the final story. One of the most dramatic examples of quiet excellence in modern culture. Michael Jordan. Most people remember the championships. Few remember what happened before them. Jordan was famously cut from his high school varsity basketball team. For many young people, that experience would have become a permanent psychological wound, a story they repeated forever, a source of resentment, a lifelong battle against perceived rejection. Jordan chose a different path. He focused relentlessly on mastery, not revenge, mastery. There is a psychological concept known as self-efficacy, introduced by psychologist Albert Bandura. It refers to the belief that you can influence outcomes through your own actions. People trapped in superiority hierarchies constantly seek permission. People with strong self-efficacy create evidence. Every training session, every improvement, every achievement. Evidence. Over time, Jordan's identity stopped depending on the opinions that once limited him, and that is the hidden lesson. The strongest response to being underestimated is not emotional retaliation. It is undeniable competence, because competence creates independence, and independence destroys artificial hierarchies. Now connect all three stories. A woman who stopped defining herself through comparison. A broadcaster who stopped defining herself through criticism. An athlete who stopped defining himself through rejection. Different lives, different circumstances. The same psychological pattern. Their greatest victories occurred when they stopped organizing their identity around the people who doubted, judged, compared, or diminished them. This brings us back to the central truth. Many people appear powerful only because others continue feeding the illusion. The illusion survives through emotional investment. Attention, reaction, fear, approval seeking. Once those disappear, something remarkable happens. The spotlight changes direction. For the first time, you see the structure clearly. What looked like superiority was often dependency in disguise. What looked like confidence was sometimes insecurity seeking validation. What looked like dominance was often control sustained by attention. And the moment your nervous system becomes regulated, the moment your peace no longer depends on anyone else's approval, the moment your happiness exists without reference to a particular person, their influence reaches its natural limit. Because your silence accomplishes what arguments never could. It proves that your life continues, your growth continues, your purpose continues, and your value was never something another human being had the authority to grant. The final collapse of any false hierarchy happens when the person beneath it simply stands up and walks forward, not with anger, not with revenge, not with hostility, with peace, because peace is the ultimate evidence of freedom, and freedom is the one thing no illusion can survive. Before you go, here's a question. Have you ever reached a point where someone's opinion of you completely lost its power? And what was the moment that made you realize it? Share your experience in the comments below. What if they finally accepted their feelings for you? This morning, The answer may be hidden in signs you've been missing all along. Now appearing on your screen, they finally accepted their feelings for you this morning. Carl Jung. Watch now. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.